Hey everybody, it's Meredith Miller, your coach from Inner Integration. Today, the message that I want to bring to you is about the sexual obsession with the narcissist, even long after you get out of that relationship. This is one of the most common questions that people ask me in private, usually in sessions, or I'll get messages from people. Often they don't want to ask this out loud, but believe it or not, this is one of the most common questions that I get from those of you who have been in intimate relationships with narcissists. So I want to talk about first, like what sex is like with a narcissist or other cluster B personality disorder. What it's like, what the process is, why it's so hard to stop thinking about it afterward, and what you can do about it now. So, sex with narcissists, when you're in an intimate relationship with them, it's like this extra layer of glue. It's like a super glue that makes it more complicated to move on afterward. It makes it ever more complicated than, say, a work relationship or a neighbor or a friendship or someone who you didn't have a sexual relationship with. In a normal intimate relationship where you have sex with someone and you break up, in a normal relationship, it can feel like flesh ripping apart as you guys separate. And that's a normal relationship. So imagine that's like 10 times notches kicked up higher when you're trying to separate from a narcissist, that kind of flesh pulling apart, psychological ripping apart, the incredible amount of obsession that you might have. So sex with the narcissist, sex is often used as a form of supply, and it is most certainly used as a form of power and control, though it can present in almost completely black and white opposite forms. Usually sex with the narcissist is amazing. Usually there's some kind of fabricated intensity, like they really ramp up the intensity in some way. Often like they've studied and learned how to be, the most amazing lover. But what you'll notice, though, if you're really paying attention or if you look back with new perspective, what you might notice is that it was actually kind of robotic. It only seemed amazing in the moment because of that fabricated intensity that they created, the hype, and there was probably a lot of talk hype before it even happened, so that they created this idea, this image, this illusion in your mind, this fantasy that was so hyped up that in the moment, like you were living in that fantasy and not even necessarily paying attention to how hollow and shallow it actually was or how robotic they actually were. What you might even notice is like they had a performance pattern. It went dot, 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 and you could just like almost predict like exactly what they would do. So that's one thing, is that you might notice that there was some sort of robotic thing. That's kind of helpful to look back and notice that versus the romanticizing that it was so amazing and it'll never be that good again, because it will, and it can be a lot better. There are occasions, there are certain kinds, brands of narcissists or other cluster Bs where the sex with them is like almost non-existent, like very infrequent or non-existent. Why? They might have some sort of moral, religious, dogmatic view on things. Maybe they were programmed with some kind of Catholic guilt about sex, so they have a lot of issues with it. Like they are kind of asexual, or they can't really open up sexually, or every time you have sex with them, they punish you, or they go into some kind of weird, depressive, withdrawing state because they're in some kind of religious beating themselves up, shaming sort of thing. The infrequent or rare sex can also happen when a person is withholding it. So, often it's used as currency. Sex can be withheld if you don't do what they want, if you don't meet their expectations and their whims and blah, blah, blah. If you set a boundary. If you say no to something, they might withhold the sex from you. Most often I hear this from men who are abused by women, but this can also happen where women are abused by men who withhold sex. I know it's much more rare. Usually that man is having sex with someone else when he's not having sex with you. Could be that the woman is too. but usually it's withheld for that purpose. So, again, it's also used as currency. That can be to ask for favors. I hear this again a lot from married men who are married to narcissists, where, she will start to seduce them and talk it up because she wants something. And he just knows, and they know, like, every time that she starts ramping up the sex thing, like, she wants you to do something for her. So it can be used to ask for favors. It can be also used as some sort of reward, like a dosing. They might dish it out as a reward if you did what they wanted. For some reason they'll dish that out. Sex can really be confused with intimacy. Now, this can be confused in ordinary life, in ordinary relationships, but it's even more confusing in these sorts of relationships because it might be the only form of actual intimacy that you have, and you might think that it's the real deal, the real form of intimacy, but it's not. It's only some sort of superficial form of intimacy. It's confused with intimacy. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind, is that, if that was all you had, like, for example, if you answer yes to this question, when you had sex with that person, is that when you felt the closest to them emotionally, physically, spiritually? But then when you weren't having sex, you always felt they were kind of distant, like you couldn't quite reach them, you couldn't really connect with them. That would let you know that this was going on, that you were confusing the sex with intimacy, that they were using the sex as a tool to make you think that you were a lot more intimate than you were, and that was all you had. So maybe that's why you're so obsessed with it right now, thinking about the sex and missing the sex, because what you're actually craving is intimacy, like true emotional intimacy, which is not the same as what you had with the narcissist. And then the final thing I want to wrap up on sex with the narcissist is that it represents power and control. Like, it is 100% used as a tool for power and control with the narcissist. And what you'll often find is that they want to bring in some sort of really out there, really kinky, really BDSM sorts of activities that involve dominance and submission, because that is a sexualization of the power issue. And, I really want to caution you. I'm not coming from a moral place. I'm not standing in some kind of moral high ground on this. What I'm saying simply about the BDSM thing is you are playing with fire. That's a power game. And that fire will consume you. It will consume that relationship. Even when you enter into that with good intentions, it will somehow destroy that relationship. Some outside force will get in there and it will destroy any potential of true connection that you can have with that person. It's playing with fire when you play with that kind of power and control. So I would really caution you about that. You might have found yourself drawn to BDSM because of power issues in your past. Maybe you were seeking to be dominated because you're used to that. You're used to being submissive. You don't even know how to express what you want. You're embarrassed to express what you want. You're ashamed to express what you want. You'd rather somebody else just tell you what to do and control you sexually. Could be that you're so used to having to be in this perfectionistic state and doing everything right that when you have sex with someone, you want to completely surrender and allow them to dominate you. I mean, there could be a number of things that are going on, but recognize that if you're drawn to that it's some sort of sexualization of the power issue, and really it's just going to be healthier for you to look at the power issue. Like, maybe you need to play with that sexually for a period of time until you can really understand it. But I really want to urge caution that eventually that just becomes a destructive force, to both of you, to the other person, to the whole relationship, because the lines just get so blurred and it's really just a power game. So, back to the whole, the true intimacy thing, how does that differ? How does sex with the narcissist in intimacy with the narcissist differ from true actual intimacy? That's probably what you're craving. So, oops, my screen lost. The experience of intimacy is essentially when two people come together and they are both completely present in the moment, when they are both empathic, they can feel one another. They're not just self-absorbed. They're not just thinking and feeling themselves. Like they can actually feel each other, almost like they can read each other, and their bodies even move together in an unspoken language. It's when both people are willing to give and receive. Sometimes we think, well, I just want to look for like a generous lover, like someone who's just very giving. But you also need to be able to receive. Like if you're just always giving and you're unable to receive, then you're not having that communion, that unity sort of experience, that oneness that can take place through sexual intimacy. So, be willing to receive. Be willing to receive love. Be willing to receive someone giving to you. It's okay to receive as well, especially those of us coming out of the codependency patterns where we were taught to people please. Maybe we've been entirely too giving and unable to receive. So if you can't receive, even if someone awesome shows up in your life and they want to give to you, you might just push it away and not allow that intimacy circle. Another thing is that both people are in integrity with themselves, right? With oneself. Like, so if you show up into that sexual encounter and you're not in integrity with yourself, if you're accepting an open relationship when that's not what you want monogamy, you're not in integrity with yourself. If you show up with a partner who promises monogamy, but they're fucking around behind your back, they're not in integrity with themselves, and you can't be in integrity with yourself being with that person because you want a monogamous partner, even if you don't know what they're doing behind your back. When these things are going on, there's not true intimacy. You can't have that. So, true intimacy is not fronting, putting on a show, putting on a performance, some sort of self-absorption, one-way sort of thing where, it's just all about one person and the other person isn't even like there, like might as well be an inanimate object because it's just a one-way kind of thing. Or even just the simple disconnection. Like if you're not really emotionally connected with that person, then there's a disconnect there. You're not going to be able to have that true intimacy. If one person is checked out or both people are checked out, like dissociated, which could be happening especially if you have been sexually abused in childhood. There might be a period of time where you feel like you're not really present, or maybe you're having sex with someone, then all of a sudden they're like, where'd you go? Are you there? Because you checked out, like you dissociated, something triggered you and you just checked out unconsciously. It takes practice to bring yourself present into the moment. So these sorts of things are what interrupt a true intimate connection. And, remember too that intimacy is not just sex. And sex is not necessarily intimacy. True intimacy is when both people are 100% emotionally engaged, whether it's physical or not, 100% emotionally engaged. So if you find yourself in this whole obsession with the narcissist and sex with the narcissist, and you're like, oh my God, I'm ruined. It's never going to be good enough again. It's never going to be that good. Am I ever going to stop thinking about it? Are you ruined? No, you're not ruined. You're not ruined at all. Everything's going to be okay. All right. You can't stop thinking about sex with the narcissist because maybe it's like the thing that you miss the most. Like maybe when you think back on that relationship, it's like that's the thing that it's the most that just keeps coming up. When you have flashbacks, maybe most of the flashbacks are sexual in nature. You miss that so much. Maybe you find yourself like craving them, like desiring them, wanting to feel them next to you, even if it's not exactly sex, but just feeling their body next to you. You might even have feelings that if they suddenly showed up and they were naked in front of you, that you might take them back, right? That's a dangerous place to be. But a lot of people are at that place even after you get out of there, because you're craving them and missing them and desiring that intimacy so bad that if you're really honest with yourself, you might even acknowledge that you might take them back if they were right in front of you because of that. So that's a warning. Be careful if those are feelings that are coming up for you. You might even still be thinking of them as like the most attractive person in the world. And sometimes I'll hear from clients like, the weirdest thing was I wasn't even attracted to her or him at the beginning. Like I wasn't attracted to them. But then over time, they just became so attractive to you that now it's like you can't even conceive of being with anyone else because you're not even attracted to anyone else. Or maybe you're reminiscing about like what it felt like to put your head in that little nook, between like their arm and their chest, or the way your bodies spooned together, and you're like, oh, it'll never fit like that again. Like it was so perfectly fitting that nothing will ever feel the same again. You might even be thinking like, like that you're just never experience that sort of connection and sexuality with someone. Maybe this person even opened you sexually in a way. Maybe you were closed down and ashamed of your sexuality, or maybe you had come from abuse and in some way this person like got you to open up more and express yourself more, and you might associate that with that person and think that you'll never be able to do that with someone else. All of these feelings that I just mentioned are like these false constructs, like these belief systems that get installed in us through this abusive relationship, to the point where like you can't imagine yourself ever loving someone else or ever being with someone else again. Those feelings will pass. It almost always felt like that. When I look back, it's like every single time I was like, oh, it'll never be like this again. It'll never be better. And it's always going to be better. There's always going to be something better out there. You can always fall in love again. You can always love someone again. It's just that those are the constructs, the programming that are in your mind right now, if that's what you're feeling. And just know that that can change. It can change. Even if you don't see out of that yet, it can and will change. So now what? Now what do you do about this? Well, the first thing that I recommend, after you get out of one of these relationships and you're still obsessing about this person sexually, go on a sex fast. Like you're not going to have sex, and tell yourself how long. Like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. You decide what's going to work for you. But go on a fast where you're not going to have sex. I would recommend that like at least the first month, don't even masturbate. Don't even evoke that sexual energy, because at the very beginning, when it's still so raw and fresh, like everything is going to remind you of that person. You might even try to masturbate and you can't stop the flashes of them and the past and the memories, and it's still all wrapped up in there, and then it's still harder to break that off. Sometimes it's easier just to go on a total sex fast, even masturbation, for at least a month, to cleanse those energies, to purge that, to stop that whole association game, and to release that. The next thing that I recommend, is abstaining from sex for a while. So like, say you do the whole like abstaining from even masturbation for the first month. I would recommend taking several months of abstaining from sex in general. If you get involved with someone sexually immediately after, it's probably not going to go well. The past is going to get confused. Like things are going to come up. You're going to feel triggered. Like it's probably not going to work out anyways. I really recommend taking a break. I know maybe men find this suggestion harder than women, but I have heard from a lot of people who have put this into practice and said, wow, I really didn't want to do that, but I can see now in retrospect how helpful that was. Another thing that I recommend once you get yourself back out there and you start dating again is I really recommend no more casual sex. Casual sex can be a trigger. You can end up really getting your feelings hurt. When you're having casual sex, you're not having a truly intimate connection with someone. It's casual. There's no feelings there. There's no deep emotional connection. That's the whole nature of casuals. It's casual. There's no emotional connection. And you might call it friends with benefits, but like, are you even a friend of that person? I don't recommend casual sex anymore, because it's just going to get you caught up in things. And whether you're a man or a woman, if you are leaning toward the codependency side of things, when you have sex with someone, probably you start to feel a lot of emotions towards that person. Typically women feel that more than men, but men can feel that too. And men can get really hurt too by women who just want to have casual sex and just fuck them around and not really have a deeper connection with them. So I really recommend staying away from the casual sex. I also recommend to be very clear about what your boundaries are. Not to submit to pressure. When you meet somebody and they're pressuring you to have a threesome, to go to sex clubs, to do this or that thing that you don't want to do, don't give in. Don't compromise your integrity. Don't compromise what you know you want and don't want. And don't listen to their bullshit trying to bully you into what they want to do, telling you boring, or that, you're not open enough, or you're what's the word? What's that word I'm looking for? I can't remember. Begins with an F. When you're not outgoing with your sexuality, the word is not coming to me right now, sorry. But they might accuse you of doing all these things just to kind of bully you into giving into the pressure and doing what they want. That will never work out for you. That will just lead you into a path of resentment. You're going to be angry at yourself. You're going to be angry at that person. And, when somebody is pressuring you to do something that you don't want to do, that's not a healthy situation to begin with. They need to be able to listen to your no. And, if you're in a situation where you don't want to have sex at all, and that person is pressuring you to have sex, I highly recommend to walk away. Just to walk away, because that person is not listening to you. Another thing is to wait for the emotional connection. Not having the casual sex, waiting until you meet someone where you feel emotionally engaged, where you feel emotionally connected, where you feel emotionally safe, where you feel like this person is able to give and receive emotionally, and you can have this unity experience emotionally before you take it to that level physically. And, if it's not there, again, be willing to walk away. Maybe you meet a great person. Maybe they're an awesome person, but there just isn't that emotional connection. So walk away. Don't start a sexual relationship with someone where this just isn't going to go anywhere. There just isn't that connection. Don't hope that the sex is somehow going to create that connection. If it's not there, the sex is not going to help it. It's just going to make things worse. It's just going to make you more bonded to that person. It's going to be harder to leave, all of that. So what are the results then? If you take these steps and you put these into practice, what are the results? Well, you're going to reset your sexual energy, because essentially you have been with this person, you have been in these old patterns. You want to reset your sexual energy before you get involved with someone else again. That's really important. You're also resetting your brain chemistry, all of the oxytocin and serotonin and vasopressin, all of those brain chemicals that are going on when you're in a sexual relationship. It spikes and all of this. And so when you take a period of time off, you're allowing your brain chemistry to come back to baseline. And if you don't allow yourself to do that, you're never going to know what that baseline is. You're just jumping from relationship to relationship or sexual encounter to sexual encounter. You're never going to get back to that baseline, which is really healthy, I think, in order to be able to enter into a new relationship, in order to be able to really gauge what is that and intuitively feel that out. I think it's really important. It's also going to allow you to focus your energy on other manifestations in your life. Maybe physical activities, maybe you want to hike a mountain or do a triathlon, or there's some kind of physical thing that you're training for. You're going to save your energy for that. Maybe you want to create some sort of creative project, and so you can channel your energy into that instead. Maybe you want to work on some kind of spiritual practice, and so you can channel your energy into that instead. And I recommend that you continually remind yourself what you really want. What do you really want in a sexual partner? What do you really want in an emotional connection? And say no to everything else. Because if you don't say no to it, what you're telling the universe is that that's okay for you, that's acceptable, and you're just going to keep getting more of the same. So in order to create something new in your life, you have to be able to say no to all of that stuff that is not what you want. And I highly recommend that when you are catching yourself fantasizing romanticizing about that person, like, you're thinking about the past and you're just romanticizing about how amazing the sex was or everything, I highly recommend that you catch yourself in that process and that you remind yourself of the big picture, like the truth of that situation, that sex was used as a tool, that it was power play, that it wasn't real emotional connection. Remind yourself of those truths so that you stop slipping into that comfortable addiction of wanting to go to that fantasy and that nostalgia and that romanticizing of an illusion, of something that wasn't even real. And that's just going to keep you trapped in that reality and in that world, and you're not going to be able to get yourself out. So say no to the fantasy, say no to the illusion, keep reminding yourself of the big picture. And you'll get out of this. Like, it will wear off in the initial stages, like the first month, could even be 3 months. It could be really intense, that sexual obsession, but it will wear off. And I highly recommend using some of these strategies that I've given you today because it will help the process tremendously. I'm sending you all a big hug.